Hello, listeners. Before we begin today's episode, we want to provide a trigger warning. The content of this episode will include discussions of child abuse and specific cases that tragically resulted in the death of a child. We understand that these topics are deeply distressing and can be triggering for many people. If you feel that this content may be too difficult for you to listen to, we encourage you to prioritise your mental health and consider skipping this episode. If you or someone you know is affected by any of the issues discussed, please seek support from a trusted person or professional. You can find links to support services in our show notes. Thank you for understanding and please take care while listening. And would you say that that type of role that you do is kind of not known about by other social workers?
I didn't know about it.
Yeah.
I didn't know about it. And even when I'm telling my other social work friends as well about it, like the ones who are still doing up, frontline on the service in local authority, big up yourself.
Big up yourself.
Big up yourself.
Because we know it's hard.
Welcome back, everyone, to Tea with the Social Workers. I'm Rita.
And I'm Paris.
And we're here to serve you some tea on what's really going on in these social work streets. So today in this episode, we're really going to be looking at what type of social workers are out there and what's the different type of social workers that you can sort of bump into your day-to-day life. And then also, what do they do besides removing children? Like, we need to know. So please like, subscribe, do what you need to do to follow us and to continue getting this tea. First and foremost, let's figure out who you're talking to here. So maybe let's just start by getting to know our roles a little bit. So I know we've spoken about it in a previous episode, but Paris, let's get us started. What do you do? What type of social work are you into?
What do? I feel like I'm one of them people that have bounced around different fields in social work. So currently I am a perinatal social worker. A lot of people might be like, what is that? Like, is that a children's social worker? What do you do? So a perinatal social worker means I work with women who are pregnant and post-pregnancy up to 1 year and who are experiencing mental health troubles, whether that be generally severe, moderate to severe mental health. So that could be something like depression, or it could be something like postpartum psychosis, could be bipolar, and just some mental health troubles that someone might be experiencing during that time of birth and after birth.
So what do you do with them? Like, why do they need you specifically? Why do they need a social worker in your specific role?
Okay, so I sit within a team of generally nurses. I'm the only social worker in my team. So my support generally helps around what we would say like social issues. So where people may be experiencing things like domestic violence. I'm going to say housing issues, but as we know, like housing is not social work, but it is something that comes to me a lot because in terms of a social worker and a nurse would be like... So they would kind of bring that my way. But what I would kind of do with that is signpost and give some kind of information. I also help with the management of mental health, but that's not necessarily my role per se. That's more the nurse's role. But I will join in on assessments. So we might do a joint assessment because there's already some social issues that we're aware of. We might also have children that are already on, say, child in need plans or child protection plans. Or sometimes the nurses might come to me and be like, look, I've got this case. I'm really concerned. Can I have a consultation with you? I'm not really sure what to do about this issue. And again, those issues could be something related to domestic violence, could be related to homelessness, could be related to infant parent issues or any issue outside of
I love a case study.
Okay.
I love
a case study.
It's just because it helps me to understand, it just helps me to visualize and, understand what's going on. So if, for example, I was a pregnant person, and I have gone into the GP or I've turned up for an appointment, like a health appointment. I've done a pregnancy test at home, but I haven't actually gone and done anything about it. Yeah. This time I'm about maybe 5 months going on 6 months. I've then shared at the appointment that it's because I've not been able to leave the house because my partner doesn't like me going out. Is that when a perinatal social worker would get involved?
Not necessarily. I think they'd probably more send that to the local authority because we need to see that there's concerns around mental health. So it would be trying to understand, is the person not leaving the home because of their mental well-being, or is that because of an issue with their partner where it's looking at something like domestic abuse, which would mean then it would go to the local authority. But then if that person had a previous history of, say, bipolar or depression, then they would send it over to the perinatal team if there's existing mental health for us to kind of assess. So we'd get that referral, have a look at it, have a conversation with the referrer, also have a conversation with the patient, and kind of see, again, we're voluntary, so they don't have to take our service, but we would offer the service, see if it's something that they're interested in. And then once we kind of say, okay, this person is interested, we then send it over to the team. The team speak about it we'd call that an MDT meeting, the multidisciplinary team. We'd all speak about it and see, does this meet our service? Also in those meetings, we have outside agencies. So we might have like a talking therapy team who also sits in those meetings where we say, actually, that sounds more like us, we'll take that. It's low level. It's not something that requires perinatal input, not just a social worker, perinatal input as a whole.
So should I be worried as a mum when a perinatal social worker gets involved? Does it mean you guys are the ones that take my babies away?
Absolutely not. And I just generally know you shouldn't be worried about any kind of social care intervention, but I do understand that people will be worried and they are worried about social care intervention, but absolutely not. And I guess it's all about breaking down that stigma and taboo around mental health. Just because you have a mental health concern doesn't mean that you're not able to take care of your children or take care of yourself throughout pregnancy. There are thousands of people that live with existing mental health and parent their children absolutely perfectly. There are also some people that need that little bit of help and support, and that's where perinatal can come in. But also just like how the local authority can come in and help with that support also.
Okay, so I'm a mum. I manage my bipolar disorder quite well. I've just found out I'm pregnant. Perinatal has got involved. How do you support me?
Okay, so first, I guess we do an assessment to kind of look at the needs. Do you want to be on medication? Because there are some people...
I don't know.
But exactly, there are some people who have been on medication previously and over the years have come off and have managed their mental health fine. There are other people who are like, I'm happy to go on medication now. There's some people who are like, I'm not taking medication, but we're not just medication focused. It is an element that we want to use to support mental health because the evidence is there to say that it can support you through these times. That's one aspect we would look at. We would also look at any kind of talking therapies that are required. So it kind of we need to know the specific issues that you're having. So yes, you've got bipolar. What are the issues that you're having with your bipolar? Okay. What are you actually struggling with is what we'd be looking at to then look at what intervention we can put in. For example, some women, after they've given birth, they may have, say, for instance, bipolar, but they're just struggling to bond with their baby, which generally some parents do anyway with mental health and without mental health. But where within our team, we would then maybe send them to a class or get one of our nursery nurses to come in and go to the home, who would then be able to support that individual to kind of learn how to bond with their baby and what to do and what to look out for, and just kind of help them feel a little bit more confident in their parenting approach.
So if I was to get a perinatal social worker, do you continue being my social worker even after the baby is born?
So we work with families up until the baby's one, sorry. Okay. And then after that, we'd be then looking at what's the kind of pathway at that point. Do we discharge and, is everything all right? You've kind of had the support that you need and require from us. Or do we think you need continuing mental health with a community team? Then we can discharge you to a community team. Or do we just discharge you back to the GP and then you would just go to the GP as and when necessary? In terms of social work, and as me as a social worker, I also work alongside the local authority. So I may be involved to support from the perinatal perspective because we are, quote unquote, the experts in mental health. But then the local authority social workers, which are generally children's social workers, they would be looking at, if they're involved as well, they would be looking at the day-to-day well-being of the family and the children within the home.
So where are you based? Are you based inside the hospital? So if I was a mum who felt like, I need a bit of support, or I'm someone who is, maybe connected to a parent who's going to give birth, and I feel like there's support that's needed, how would we find you?
Okay, so I work for a NHS trust. I actually cover 5 different boroughs. So there's 5 boroughs that we cover, but as I'm the only social worker, I cover all 5. We're based in the community. So in the communities, not inside hospitals, but we have links and we have clinics within the hospital. So I might set up a clinic in one particular hospital or buildings linked to hospitals per se. If you wanted to get hold of us, you would go through your GP. We do have our numbers out there on the NHS website and so on, but generally we need to receive a referral. We wouldn't just reach out to you. We would need a referral. So you would generally go to your GP or any kind of organization that you're working with and let them know that you're struggling with your mental well-being, and they would then refer you. But generally GPs, I'd say, because another organization would say, go to your GP, and then your GP would refer to us.
So just to summarize, to know that I've got it right.
Yeah.
Perinatal social worker works with expectant mothers who have an element of mental health, a mental health need.
Yeah, generally moderate to severe, and expectant mothers, but also up to one year post-birth. There's a major initiative as well at the moment where we're trying to branch that out to between 3 and 5 years, because we obviously understand that those troubles of postpartum don't end after 12 months.
Honestly, the teachers is almost like they just whittle away at 12 months.
Yeah, no,
they just disintegrate into the air.
Exactly. And we know evidence shows that it really doesn't. And I'm only 5 months postpartum, as you may remember.
Ooh.
In the first couple episodes, I was
think
pregnant.
This is a good time to introduce that Rio's in the studio.
Yeah, Rio's here. I've got my 5-month-old baby in the studio today. So yeah, listen out for him, because he may start having a little conversation with us. But yeah, and even at 5 months, nothing stops. Like it's still very highly stressful, and I can't imagine. And from my own experience of working with these women, 12 months, you're still in certain places where you feel like I need longer support, more support.
Wow.
Yeah, that was a lot, right?
It is a lot. It is a lot. And I think even me as a social worker who works alongside sometimes perinatal social workers, I've learned something new today as well, because there's elements of some of the things that you've said that I've learned. And I think this is why it's important for us to have these discussions.
Yeah.
And not pretend that we know everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because even within my role, I'm learning things every day.
Yeah, let's talk about your role. Let's talk about
let's talk about it.
Tell us about your role. What are you currently
So I'm currently an adults and children safeguarding lead, again, for an NHS trust.
Nice.
And it covers, I cover a particular borough in South London. But I work alongside my colleagues who cover the other boroughs in South London as well. And what we essentially do is we give advice and information. We've been rooted within the NH Trust as the experts of safeguarding, essentially. Yeah. So what we are expected to do and what people expect of us is to provide very clear, concise, up-to-date information on what they can and can't do in terms of safeguarding children, their families, vulnerable adults. So we offer supervision. We offer one-to-one advice, consultations, but we also support the trust in reaching their sort of statutory safeguarding, safeguarding, like, I can't even remember the word, girl, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Basically making sure that they're safeguarding right.
Yeah.
And making sure that safeguarding is everybody's responsibility, because there was this notion before that safeguarding is for social workers. Yeah. Safeguarding is just for social care. Whereas we're really flying the flag for sharing that responsibility out in terms of linking it back to that guidance of working together to safeguard. And also now we have the sort of think family approach as well. Yes. So honing in the adults element, because, you know, there is that sort of gap between safeguarding what's going on with adults and safeguarding what's going on with children. Part of our role is to align those two different areas. So for me, if I was to sort of use a case study, I could have a clinician who reaches out to me, or Rita, I'm confused. I've seen a family today, or I've seen this child today, and this is how the appointment went. Something was said that has worried me. Do you think that this warrants us to make a referral to social care? And what I would do is I would offer them a consultation. I would go through the background of why they're working with the family, the sort of thinking that they've got to in terms of being worried. And then I offer advice. So sometimes the advice is, you need to calm down. This is your professional anxiety. Let people live their lives. And sometimes it's, yeah, we need to do that referral right now.
Okay.
And sometimes it on top of that referral, it might mean getting our other agency partners involved, i.e. police, depending on if there's significant harm that has been met.
Okay.
Another element of our roles as well is sometimes that harm doesn't always come from within the family or within the people that's sort of in the household. Unfortunately, sometimes that harm comes from other people in positions of trust.
Yeah.
And that could mean someone that is working within the organization.
So a staff member, essentially.
A staff member.
Yeah.
Yeah, they be doing some stuff that, needs to be addressed. And there are frameworks, which is really nice actually, that the organization does have, the trust does have these frameworks to safeguard people against these things. People like Lucy Letby, who were harming babies, and unfortunately babies lost their lives. It's to help stop things like that from occurring, and not giving a veil of silence or a shadow of darkness for people to hide under. Like we're not just here to look at what's going on in people's homes. We're here to make sure that people are safe, regardless of where they are and what they're doing. So it's really a role where we grow every day. We have to know our legislation. We have to know changes in sort of legislative guidance. We have to know services.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure for you as well, like within your role, you're going to give advice and information. And sometimes it could be that what you're recommending might be suitable for the family you don't offer.
Yeah. A lot of the time.
As a service, which is a lot of the time. And yeah, we need to know what services are out there in the community, especially now online. There's a lot of like self-help tools as well. And I think also part of my role, I'm not going to speak for others, but me personally, I like to know what's going on in the media. I like to know what's going on in the world.
We have to know,
because it shifts the dynamic of just how people are feeling in general.
Like, and who approaches your service.
Yeah. Like I remember working through the sort of George Floyd time, and there was a lot of young people that were presenting as just very angry and frustrated. Yeah, and also anxious as well, and not knowing like just what life has ahead for them. Yeah. And I think that shifted in that period of time. It did shift a lot of my conversations in terms of supporting. But my role is a big role in the sense of it covers even when things go wrong. So when things go wrong, and unfortunately sometimes this can lead to serious injury, significant harm being met, or sometimes it can lead to people losing their lives, including children and adults. And within our role, where we become part of the review for what's gone wrong.
Yeah. So are you based in the community or in a hospital?
Girl, we cover all of them.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So in terms of my role, I oversee both inpatient and community.
Okay.
And so when I was saying supervision, that is offered to both sides. And anyone that is unfamiliar with what supervision is, it's essentially you give a reflective space where a conversation can be had, really. And it can be about anything. It could be about, I'm working this case, I'm not really sure what to do with it. Can I open it up in terms of telling you all the details, and then we can find different solutions to how we could address it in a different way. So it's ever-changing, it's ever-growing, but I love it.
Do you?
Yeah, I do. I'm not going to lie.
That's good.
Yeah, I do love it, because it's almost like, for me personally in my career journey, it's the growth that I've been looking for.
Okay.
And it's my foot in the door in terms of being able to change the way people practice and the way things work.
And would you say that type of role that you do is kind of not known about by other social workers?
I didn't know about it.
Yeah.
I didn't know about it. And even when I'm telling my other social work friends as well about it, like the ones who are still doing up, frontline on the service in local authority, big up yourself.
Big up yourself.
Big up yourself.
Because we know it's hard.
Yeah, like they don't know about it as well. And to be fair, big up yourself, Paris as well, because Paris is being modest here. Paris is actually the one who told me about these roles.
Yeah.
And you were a very big support to me in helping me see my transferable skills that I would be able to transfer into this role.
Yeah, and even the NHS, right?
It's really, really hard. I think, let's talk about the different roles actually. Because we've touched on local authority and we've touched on sort of social work roles. So
yes. I done a similar role to what you're doing. I was a safeguarding advisor based in a hospital for adults. And I did very similar stuff to what you done as well. So we were kind of doing domestic homicide reviews. We were doing serious case reviews, serious incident reports. And because I had that children's experience, I often used to help out with the children's team as well here and there. And sometimes here and there, the maternity safeguarding as well. So we used to deal with inpatients as well as the community. And we would see harm in terms of, someone might have got like a bed sore while being in hospital for a long time. So that is technically seen as neglect, because there are ways to prevent people getting bed sores when they're in hospital for a long time. So we'd have to kind of investigate that and how that happened, and were the nurses doing the right thing? Were they turning the patient when they should have been turning the patient, and so on. But then we also would get involved in the training. So we used to provide safeguarding training to our colleagues within the NHS as well. So that could be from, a nurse to a consultant to a staff nurse and all the different positions, which I really enjoyed. I really liked doing the training. It took me a while to get used to, because I don't find that I'm that kind of teacher per se. But once I got the hang of it, I was like, oh, this is quite cool. I feel like I know what I'm talking about. So that was quite good. And I also never saw myself doing something like that with my social work degree. I very much was like, right, I'm a children's social worker. That's what I'm doing. That's where I'm going. And that's all I can do.
Yeah.
But so I done that type of role. Another role that I done, I worked as a care coordinator.
Okay. What's a care coordinator?
Someone who coordinates the care. Essentially, I don't know if this is the right term. I would kind of refer to them as like a glorified, I don't know if you'd say glorified social worker or glorified support worker, because they do a lot.
They do a lot.
Like, I was like, what is this? Like, we were trying to do absolutely everything. So I worked for a psychosis team. So early intervention into psychosis. So this is where people, adults, so from 18 to 65, where adults had experienced their first episode of psychosis. So with that, they'd come in, they'd have their assessment to kind of, after they've had this episode of psychosis, so generally have come out of hospital, we'd assess them, see what their needs are, see how we can rehabilitate them per se. And it was kind of breaking down that taboo around mental health. Can we get this person back out to work? So we had like an employment specialist in there who'd help that person get back to work. Also, because I had a guy on my caseload who had been fired because he had this quote unquote strange episode of psychosis. They weren't defining it as psychosis, but it had, I guess, elements of psychosis. And he was a bus driver. And as soon as he kind of let them know that he'd been unwell, they dismissed him. So our employment specialist helped him basically fight for unfair dismissal to get his job back. We also had people in the team to provide therapy. And that's something I missed as well in terms of perinatal. We always have someone who's going to provide that therapeutic support to help people kind of understand sometimes their previous trauma that's not related to the psychosis, but also the kind of traumas that they can experience after having psychosis, or the episode that they may have had with their mental health. And we kept people on our caseload. Oh, I don't even want to be quoted because I think it was 2 years.
Don't throw them under the bus.
No, I think it was 2 years, but it was a really good team. In terms of mental health teams, they say that mental health teams are very oversaturated, but a perinatal team and an early intervention into psychosis team, they're like specialists. So because they're specialists, a lot of government funding is pumped into them, which is why you'll have an employment specialist. You'll have people who are trained really highly in therapy to help these people. So actually, those are the better teams to be under in terms of mental health, as opposed to just a community mental health team. Because unfortunately, those are the teams where, people get lost.
Yeah.
If they're not engaging, you're just unfortunately a number on a caseload of like 1 of 60. So the people who are engaging get that support. The people who aren't, the workers are struggling to engage, and then kind of you're just left on that list.
So like talking about funding and like where the funding goes sometimes to bring about sort of social work roles in areas where you wouldn't have normally seen them. So I'd done a stint as a social worker in schools. So in recent years, there was government funding that was put together for a pilot scheme of putting social workers in schools. And a social worker in school essentially is you are almost planted in a school, and your aim is to reduce the amount of cases that turn into social care referrals.
Yes.
So
early intervention.
Early intervention. Yeah. So you work with young people. You build on that relationship building. So you get to know these young people from year 7.
Okay.
And essentially, the role is to build these relationships with the children, the families, the teachers, and sometimes just put out the fires before they blow up.
Yeah.
So yeah, I really loved that. And it was in that role that I got to see other social workers in different roles, sort of non-statutory roles. So when we're saying statutory or non-statutory, statutory is where legally you are working under the framework of the Children's Act as a social worker.
Yeah.
However, there are roles which you are not working under that statutory framework. So I could be a social worker and I could be recruited, for example, into a housing team. So I've got my social work background. I keep my social work pin because I keep my CPD going.
Yeah.
But actually within this role, I don't have any social work powers. But I'm rooted in a team that works with vulnerable people, i.e. people in temporary accommodation, for example, people going through their sort of housing process. Yeah. But with my social work knowledge, I provide a sort of expert perspective.
Basically my perinatal role.
Basically your role, but without the money.
Yeah.
Are we going to talk about the money today?
Okay. I guess that, we could talk about the money, yeah. So I am in a non-statutory position because I don't have those powers you would have as a children's social worker. So generally those non-statutory roles where you're working for like organisations like, let's throw some out there, Refuge.
Yeah.
Can you think of
sort
any
of charity if we just say sort of charity voluntary organisations.
Yeah. They're generally not paid as well as maybe someone who's working in the local authority. I'm not sure about numbers per se, but I do think there's more money in statutory.
There's more money in statutory. We're not going to lie. Okay, we're not here to kid with you. We're here to spill the tea. There's more money in statutory. But that's because the numbers are high. Your caseloads are going to be high. They're going to work you for the MPs, okay?
It's seen as being a much more difficult role. You're managing a lot more risk. And I do think with social work, the more risk you manage, the more you should be paid. I'm not necessarily saying that you are paid, because there are some of those cases that do sit in voluntary organisations that they don't meet the threshold. But they're complex. They're complex. Yeah. Like there's many different needs going on. There's substance misuse, there's domestic abuse, there's loads of different things happening, homelessness, whatever it may be, but actually, it doesn't meet the threshold for us. Or if we're talking about, say, adults, generally it's that person has capacity. They are allowed to make unwise decisions. Exactly. And capacity is a whole nother subject because I think that's a big struggle in terms of people assessing capacity and not really understanding how to assess capacity to understand whether somebody has. But we'll park that.
We're going to park that. The reason why I'm going to park that is just because the money thing was an area that it took me a long time to learn. And I think if I knew the different areas that I could go in terms of money, I think I would have made decisions a little bit differently. Like, for example, understanding the difference between what sort of money I would get as a permanent social worker or as an agency social worker.
Dun, dun, dun. The agency social worker that we all love and hate. Because that was literally, I remember going in to the local authority and having those kind of conversations.
Yeah.
And they're like, I'm off tomorrow. And I'm like, oh, is it? And they're like, I don't need to work today. Like, I'm agency. Like, oh, okay.
Do you know what it was for me? What it was for me, when we were applying for our ASYE, so for anyone who doesn't know, your ASYE is your assisted and supported year in employment. So it's the first year that you do after you've qualified. And it's really just a place where you're allowed to just have space to get to know the role and to consolidate your learning. So when we're applying for our ASYE, I actually chose my ASYE because that particular local authority was paying more than the others.
Yeah.
Obviously, now I know they were paying more than the others because it was one of the harder ones to do. But yeah, it was a pretty nice packet. It was over 30k.
Yeah.
And I was doing up, all right, I've hit the 30 mark. I'm doing good.
Yeah.
And I was feeling nice.
Yeah.
Until that one day we're just having lunch and we start discussing money for some reason. And the agency social workers are telling me how much they're earning in the month. And it was nowhere near 30k.
Had you in a chokehold?
One of these, okay? I had to gather myself together because I actually felt like, why am I even here? This person's making double what I'm making and we're holding the same cases. So if you want the money, you might want to consider going agency. Just to make it clearer, when I'm saying agency are different companies. They're independent companies that basically recruit social workers. And what they do is they have their own individual contracts with whatever. It could be a local authority, it could be a health service. And they're essentially a recruitment agency. And they specialize in recruiting just social workers. And they send them out to work. So you don't have the same structures that you would have in a sort of being employed directly by that local authority or health service or whatever. So it's just a different, it's basically down to the type of contract that you hold. However, if you do want to go agency, there are positives, which is the money.
Yeah.
But there are also negatives, i.e.
maternity. You don't get maternity pay.
If you're trying to have a baby, get a permanent contract because they're not going to be paying you maternity unless you yourself are going to be structured enough to sort of manage your money and put away little pots of money for specific things, i.e. holiday pay, i.e. sick pay, i.e. I'm planning to have a baby, so I need to put X amount away because those things aren't built into your agency contracts. But you will be nice on the money, okay?
And 1 week's notice. They can just say,
notice, I'm out here.
So your local authority can say, okay, we don't need you anymore. We've got a permanent member to cover your position. So we'll give you 1 week's notice and then sayonara.
We went through that thing where they rounded them all up?
Oh,
yeah.
yes.
So that's also another negative with agency social workers in that the organisation that you're working for can decide at any time that they don't want to extend your contract. So they could very much get you into a room and say, right, we need 20 of you gone. So we're not going to extend your contracts past.
Unless you want to come permanent.
Unless you want to come back permanent.
Yeah. So they will urge you to go permanent to keep your position. Otherwise, they will be looking at dismissals. And I remember when our local authority was doing that and that was a bit like, eek. But agency workers who have been doing it for a long time are like, that's fine because social workers are needed and required everywhere. And there's no shortage. So if this local authority is like, okay, we don't need you no more, they know that they'll contact their agency and be like, look, I've got a week, I need to find somewhere else, and they'll find you somewhere tomorrow. Yeah.
Or today.
And you can base that on your money as well. You can say, well, I want, I don't know, £40 an hour. And, for that £40 an hour, they're going to work you.
Yep.
They are going to work you. Like your caseload is going to be crazy.
But at least you'll get your Gucci bag.
But yeah, you might get your Gucci bag or your mortgage, whatever it may be. And that's not to necessarily make light. A lot of people, we don't want people to think that, come into social work for the money because no amount of money can save your mental health. Let me just say that as a perinatal social worker.
Say that again.
No amount of money can save your mental health. When you're struggling with that caseload, you will be asking yourself, is this £40 worth it?
Is it worth it?
Yeah.
No.
And
it's
it never
£40 don't even cover the therapy that you're going to need for that hour.
Exactly. Exactly that.
And that's why I've stuck with permanent. Because I'm a mum. I've got my two in the studio with me today as well. Pick up yourselves over there.
Hey!
But yeah, that's for me. It was really important for me to have that structure, that stability, and know that if one of my daughters says, "Mum, I'm unwell today. I can't go in," that I can actually not go into work and not have to worry that I'm not going to be paid today.
Yeah.
That I can book off holidays when I need to book off holidays, that I have that protection in terms of having a HR department and having, just those structures in place that come as part of the contracts, I was also able to access certain benefits. For example, I could use the company cars that were available in that particular local authority at the time when they were much younger. You're able to access things in terms of like getting reimbursements and stuff like that. But also just having that stability of not having to worry about where I'm going to be in the next 6 months.
Yeah.
So yeah, for me personally, as a working mum, the stability of permanency has given me what I need, because it also has allowed me to do training for free, which is offered as part of my permanent role. So I can then use that to continue growing, continue shifting into new roles. But also it has allowed me to continue to see me and just have a plan for my life.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, where I think sometimes the negatives of the agency is, there's the negatives of an agency if you are a newly qualified social worker.
Oh yeah.
If you're a seasoned veteran and you want to jump into agency, do your thing.
Do your thing.
But if you are a newly qualified social worker and you're jumping into agency, the fallback can be that when you want to move, you haven't diversified your skills.
Yeah.
Because you've sort of trained as, for example, in assessment and referrals. They've offered you an agency role in assessments and referrals. You banged that out 2 years, 3 years. You've got used to the money. You now want to jump into something else, or you want to sort of start rising. It can be a little bit difficult at that stage because you haven't diversified your skills.
Yes.
So just have a plan is all I'm going to say. Have a plan of how you're going to do that if that's something that you want to do.
Yeah. And I remember one of the managers when I worked in the local authority was very much like, I'm not taking on any social workers that have qualified a year and gone agency. One, it's not fair to them because generally
it's tough.
Because it's tough. There's a big caseload. If they're, like I said, if they're paying you, double what a permanent social worker is getting, they're going to make you work for it. So when your manager's kind of dispersing those cases, they want to give those kind of cases to the most qualified, the veterans. And actually, you've only been qualified a year, so you haven't seen enough. You haven't worked enough cases. So it's not fair to then ask you to work these cases, but then why are you on my team?
Yeah.
Because if I can't use you how I need to use you, but I'm paying you how you feel that you should be paid, it just doesn't work and translate. So I remember my manager was like, I'm not taking anyone. And they kind of raise their eyebrows to people who go straight to agency after qualifying. And I mean, it works for some people. It works for some. If that's what people want to do. But I would always recommend, and I'm not saying this because I'm biased, because I've always been permanent as well, but I would always recommend staying in the field, getting as much training as you can as a permanent social worker, because that training is free, getting as much experience as you can within the kind of permanent roles, jump around the different teams within the local authority and just build up your experience so that when you go agency, and you're making that great amount of money, you can manage the caseload and you can go, I've had a case like this. I've worked this kind of case before. And the expectation is on you, but you can meet those expectations because, as I said, they'll get rid of you in a week.
Yeah, talking about that hopping around, because that's what I done. I hopped around in different teams within the local authority. So I was started off as assessments and referrals. Then I jumped into sort of contextual safeguarding teams. I done the stint at the social work in schools team, worked in fostering and adoption. So it's that jump that I was able to see different aspects and different areas of social work that I've then been able to hone in and use to get this role that I'm currently in. But I've also seen that there's social workers rooted in sort of commercial services as well.
What do you mean by commercial?
Commercial services. So like there's some like banking groups that that employ social workers and they work with their staff and they sort of support them. Again, it's that sort of non-statutory stuff. So they need their sort of expertise in terms of human growth and development, understanding how people work and stuff like that. And they use those sort of skills in a transferable way to manage. To manage people's well-being.
Yeah. And as you say that, I'm like, I worked with someone who had been a CAFCAS guardian, but prior to that, she'd worked in one of the airports as a social worker. So yeah, there's definitely a load of different roles out there to kind of venture into. I worked on a CAMS unit. I won't go into full depth about it, but I worked on a CAMS unit, working with people, working with children with eating disorders. So that was interesting. But maybe we'll do a whole kind of
we might do another
episode
one on CAMS because I've done a CAMS
covering
stint as well.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll come back to that. But yeah, there's so many different roles out there. And I think just before we close, I just want to touch on what makes someone not a good fit for being a social worker.
If you're here for the money, just go home.
Yeah.
Yeah. That already. If you're coming here because you're like, oh, I've seen the money and I'm going there to make the money and I don't care about the people then, just stay in your house or go and get another job because first of all, the money doesn't match.
Go work in tech. There's a lot of money in tech.
Yeah, there's more money in tech. Go and do something else.
Yeah.
And also, if you're there because you're trying to save people, like, don't bring that hero complex into this job because
you don't want to be saved.
You see why I let you go?
Shout out to J. Cole. Yeah.
Yeah, but those are my two. Don't come here for the money and don't come here trying to save people because people are really happy living the lives they want to live. We're really just here to support and empower them to
navigate those troubles.
To navigate through, whatever it is that they're doing.
And keep themselves and children safe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So I feel like if we keep talking, we're gonna go into way more. So we're gonna end it here. I hope you got a little bit out of what we were trying to do here and just sort of opening your mind to the different social workers that's out there, what me and Paris have been involved in. So if you want to know more and you want to hear more of our stories, click the like, subscribe, do all of them things that people tell you to do on podcasts because we're trying to see you.
Follow us on Instagram, follow us on YouTube. So that's TWT Social Workers. And hit us up.
I'm Rita.
This is Paris. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. The information presented in this podcast is for general information purposes only. In line with the Data Protection Act 2018, there will be no mention of any child, family, or local authority. While our hosts are qualified social workers registered with Social Work England, the content of this podcast does not establish a social worker to client relationship. For any specific questions or concerns about your situation, we encourage you to consult with your local authority for guidance specific to your situation. Thank you.